Hangout. My name is Steph Sherer. I'm the Executive Director and Founder of Americans for Safe Access. And we're here today to talk about actually a recent report that we just put out evaluating all 40 state laws from the perspective of patients. And we have some special guests here today to talk about the significance of well-drafted medical cannabis laws and what they mean for patients and for the people in those patients' lives. Over the years, medical cannabis laws have changed quite dramatically. When we first started passing laws in 1996, these laws were really allowing patients a defense in court. So if somebody was arrested and they had a letter from their doctor, they could show that to the court and ask to not have the criminal sanctions against them. But over the years, we realized that that wasn't enough for a patient's life. And in 2003, we actually began passing distribution laws in states like California to create a safe place where patients could access their medication. And slowly, that, what we called community-based access, grew into these larger industry-type legislation that's included full-blown licensing for the cultivation, for the manufacturing and distribution of cannabis. And we've also, as we started seeing more commercialization of the medical cannabis industry, we began working with the American Herbal Products Association to develop product safety standards to make sure that while people were producing these medications for patients, that they were safe and that the products that patients were getting were accurately labeled, and that patients could purchase these products with the confidence that there would be no mold or mildew or contaminants or pesticide residue on these. So this year, for our report, we actually saw quite a different grading system. We actually gave a fifth of the grade towards product safety protocols, but it was pretty exciting to see 40 states, even if not all of those states are working 100% for patients. And yet again this year, there's not a single state that has an A, which means that as patient advocates, we still have work to do. And we've designed this report so you can actually pull out your state's grade and take it to your legislators to talk to them about how they can improve the law. I think many of the laws that are first passed, they're really subject to political viability. So what can pass in one state as a first go-around may not be politically viable in another. But the good news is that in all of these states that have passed laws, even the very restrictive ones, we're seeing an improvement in those. That we're seeing state legislators and state regulators really making an effort to make these laws work for patients. And so today, I wanted to, before we sort of dive into some of the regulations, I want to introduce you to some individuals that have been affected by these laws and how this long process of politicians coming together with patients advocates to draft legislation or to implement legislation has impacted their lives. And actually, the first person I want to introduce is from Georgia, Sebastian Cody, who is actually, I believe, on the road right now, and so we're just going to hear his voice. Sebastian, welcome, and can you tell us a little bit about your experience in Georgia and how these changing laws are affecting your life?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So my name is Sebastian, and I have a little boy. His name is Jagger, and he's 5 years old, and he has a rare form of mitochondrial disease. And after we could not pass the bill in Georgia 2 years ago, HB 885, we actually, with my wife and my son Jagger, we moved to Colorado to access cannabis for my son. And he did great on cannabis, a lot less seizures, a lot less muscle pain, just a totally different kid. So we were very happy. And then we were able to pass HB 1 in Georgia last year. So in September, we actually moved back to Georgia. And now we are back in Georgia, and we are trying to pass HB 722, because right now all we have is a possession-only bill, so it's still putting a lot of burden on the parents and technically making parents criminals criminal and drug smuggler to go to Colorado or anywhere on the West Coast or anywhere they have access and bring things back to Georgia. And once we bring it back to Georgia, we are 100% legal. But on the way back to Georgia, we are technically breaking a ton of federal laws. So we are really pushing for a new bill which will allow us to grow and distribute in Georgia, so we won't have to worry about that, and it will be a lot easier for the parents. So that's what we're trying to do now.
Well, thank you, Sebastian. I know it's a long effort, and I think that what can be challenging for patient advocates is that there are so many steps. There's so many, what will pass first, as you can see, didn't quite work for you and your family. But I want to tell you on behalf of patients all over the country, thank you for sticking in there and trying to improve the law. It's changing lives, and just from someone who's been working on this issue for 14 years, hearing that Georgia has passed any kind of legislation is pretty exciting for this movement, and to hear that legislators are still engaged with patient advocates to improve those laws, I think give us hope all over the country. So thank you so much for your work, Sebastian.
Oh, no problem. You're welcome. And I wanted to say very quickly, it's really a team effort. We have a great team of parents. It's going to take more than one person. It's going to take a team, to do this. And we have a lot of great parents doing it. And then we're very lucky in Georgia when we have a great champion in the legislation in state, Representative Alan Peake, which is, a great champion of the cause, and he's putting so much into it, regardless of political fallout. So we're very lucky to have him in Georgia. I just wanted to make sure I say that.
Well, thank you for adding that, Sebastian, because it's true that really for us to be able to move this legislation forward, you really have to have a great team of advocates on the ground that are willing to meet with legislators. But you always have to start with that champion that's really willing to push the issue forward. So we're going to continue to watch your progress in Georgia. I know Americans for Safe Access has been helping with some of the drafting, and we look forward to patients in Georgia not having to fear where they get their medicine or how they get it.
Great. Well, thank you for all your help. We really appreciate it too. So thank you.
Of course, Sebastian. And now we're going to move to New York. I'd like to introduce Kate Jones. She's going to tell us a little bit about her experience with the New York legislature and the law there. Welcome, Kate.
Hi, thanks for having me. So to recap what's been happening in New York has had a medical marijuana bill proposed up in Albany for consecutive 17 years, I believe. So finally in 2014 we got it signed, and the program was up and running officially as of January 7th. What we have experienced here is what they're calling, I believe, the most restrictive program out of all of the states so far. The Department of Health approved 20 dispensaries. As of Monday, 17 of those dispensaries are open. We have 334 doctors who have registered, and there are 500 and just over 500 certified patients. We are hearing a lot of variability about how many of these patients are actually able to access medicine, but at least we know that the registration process is working and that people are able to move forward in some capacity. Just this past week, a bill was introduced in the Assembly that would essentially double the number of dispensaries, I believe from 20 to 40. They would allow new applicants to come into the state and apply for those new licenses. And we expect a Senate bill to be produced shortly, I believe, an accompany bill. The program here is really not getting a lot of good press. There are not a lot of positive reports about patients receiving medicine. The most recent that I posted the other day, we had a pediatric patient who traveled 4 hours in one direction to get to a dispensary that had a high CBD oil available. He paid $750 for a 1-month supply and was told, based on his child's epilepsy, that he could be paying up to $2,000 a month for that oil. So the question of will New York have low-income access has now become, will New Yorkers even be able to afford the program whatsoever? We really have no clarification from the companies as to the specific products that are being offered. There's no transparency in terms of what the strains are, what the ratios are, and also, to the best of my knowledge, they're not producing any lab reports at this time either. So basically you're going into a dispensary completely at the mercy of the 5 products that they have available, and hoping that for that immense amount of money you're spending that it will help. So that is the latest that I have from New York.
Well, thank you for that update. I know it can be extremely frustrating. It's, like you said, 17 years to pass legislation, and then once that legislation is passed, there's so many bumps in actually implementing that program. I can tell you, as a patient here in Washington, D.C., that when we first started the program, the first law that passed here was very restrictive. We actually only had 4 conditions on our condition list, and it took patient advocates going back to the legislators as well as the regulators and constantly giving feedback to the program, in order for them to change. So I commend the work you're doing, and I want you to know that it may take some time, but what's great is we're not talking about a program that could maybe exist one day in New York. We're actually talking about fixing a program that exists. And I think that what we've seen is the only way that these programs are going to improve is with constant feedback and engagement. And patients in New York are so lucky to have advocates like you, Kate, and your family continuing to do this work. And of course, Americans for Safe Access is here to help in any way that we can. One of the tools, again, back to the report, is actually taking that report card to legislators and show them specifically this is what's not working, right? And so it allows us to get out of this sort of maybe just individual reports and really focus in on these are the changes we need to see for patients and for our families. So thank you so much, Kate, for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And now we're going to move to Massachusetts. We're going to hear from Jean Sorow, who's going to tell us about that program. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Jean.
Oh, you're very welcome. Okay, where do I begin? There's quite a lot of information to be put out there. We passed medical marijuana in 2012. 63% of the voters voted for it. We've got 4 dispensaries open presently. We have a 5th opening in Quincy in the near future. There's a couple of others that are in the pipeline. It's been slow progress, but we are making progress. And we do have our Governor, Charlie Baker, on our side on the medical end of it, which is really great. The biggest problem we're running into right now is these dispensaries being able to get into these towns. We go to a lot of Board of Selectmen meetings and City Council meetings, things like that, hearings, and in support of these dispensary owners. Like myself, I'm a cancer survivor, and I'm a patient. I'm on the Board of Patient Advocates at Massachusetts Patients Advocacy Alliance. And what we try to do is go around and educate. And when I go to speak, I speak as a patient, and I inform these people on the Board of Selectmen, of what the problems are, or ask them, why they're trying to pigeonhole us. Let me see, I'm trying to think what else. We also had a coalition of state senators that just went out to Colorado on a fact-finding mission, and they came back with, they were looking for problems, and they came back and reported only problems that they felt, such as edibles. They really want to kill edibles in Massachusetts. One state senator told a group of seniors that he saw the concentrates in edibles that they're producing in Colorado and that they're totally addictive. So we're, you know, I'm so thrilled that you have this new report on the state of what's going on in every state, because now I have something physical that I can go visit the state senator with, and I can also give it to the governor. So I'm really excited about that.
Well, thank you, Jeannie. Thank you. No, you're right. These, again, you know, implementation is something that's ongoing. There's really never an end. And every year, you know, I think our goal as patient advocates is to move that bar a little closer to a working program. Jeannie, I also want to point out another report that we've created specifically for cities and counties. It's a report called "Where Will the Patients Get Their Medicine?" or sorry, obtain their medicine, and we've actually looked at all of the sort of NIMBY issues that cities and counties are looking at to want to ban these facilities, and have created a report really looking at what is the truth about crime and medical cannabis in your community. What is the truth about the effect on other businesses in these communities. But it's also important to remind people that, you know, the people that are going to be visiting these facilities look like everyone else around them. You know, we're not going to be bringing drug addicts to your neighborhood. You know, you're going to have an influx of maybe cancer and MS patients in your community, and we really don't want to be pushed out to industrial zones or places where there's no public transportation. And so, you know, the education work that you are doing is really so important, because I think, you know, members of, you know, city council members, county councilors, they, you know, if they haven't experienced what a medical cannabis dispensary looks like, they're really referring to their worst imagination. And so it's really great that they have patients to talk to really help them shape these policies. So thank you so much for your work, Jeannie.
You're welcome.
And now I'm actually going to change up a little bit. I'm going to actually bring on Dr. Jehan Marcoux, who is the chief scientist at ASA, and is also has been the lead auditor in our patient-focused certification program. He also worked with the American Herbal Products Association on the creation of standards, much of which we use to evaluate these state laws for product safety. So, Jehan, welcome, and can you tell us a little bit about the state of product safety in the United States?
Well, it's really nice to see. I think it's 11 states that have adopted best practices in product safety according to the American Herbal Products Association, the APA guidelines. And it's really nice to see this, because we have to remember that this all started as patients demanding more information about their medicine. You know, someone just said it earlier, I'd like to be able to go into New York and get more information about my medicine, more product safety information. And that's really what this is about, is patient demands being met by their regulators. And this is really great because it gives us an objective measurement to see which places are trying to meet the needs and demands and wishes of the people who are to the vulnerable populations in their community. And where we're at with quality control, I think, is that there's been a learning curve with cannabis, what's possible with it, and how to analyze it. And I think that this methodology is rolling out, and it's only going to become more easier and more commonplace. So I hope that, you know, by the time the next version of this report is published, that we see at least double the number of grades increasing based on product safety standards. You know, I also think that operators are lucky to have such an active group of qualified individuals, of patients, consumers, caregivers, because it is legitimizing cannabis as a medicine in this country. You know, if it wasn't for patients' demands, we probably, how long would it have taken for there to be laboratories testing medicine? And I think that operators in this industry owe a lot to the patient demands and their activism and saying, we know how to legitimize our medicine, and people listening to them.
So, Jehan, can you tell us a little bit about what we mean by product safety? Can you give people just sort of an overview about what that means? I mean, it's a huge portion of the report card this year. It's the whole back page of the report card includes product safety protocols. So, just tell folks a little bit about what that means and what we're talking about when we say product safety or best practices.
So we have in the best practices or standards for quality control and product safety, you know, you have practices that have to be implemented at every level, from the cultivation to the manufacturing to the laboratory and dispensing, and this can take many different forms. You know, as a science background, it's easiest for me to start with the labs, so we'll start with the laboratories. And that's making sure they're using appropriate methodology to get these tests, that we know when they are generating a result, that result has been generated using that is traceable, and so that we know where that result is coming from, responsibility for that result. And this is also important when we talk about perhaps the most important aspect of quality control is adverse events. Any product safety plan is being able to identify things that aren't supposed to be in cannabis and not letting that reach people. And I want to say I want to applaud any operator who has ever recalled a product, because they are practicing best practices. They are observing product safety standards, and that is a sign that the system is working. And so when you see a recall plan, you should not be deathly afraid. You should be like, I'm so glad that there's a quality system in place. And we've even seen in Colorado that some of these recalls have led to the products, after further analysis, being released and with nothing wrong with them. And so that's an important consideration too, is that this is a mechanism. And so one aspect of quality control and product safety is having specifications and knowing that whatever is on the label is only what's in the product. If it says no pesticides detected, you can trust that result. You know, it's also important, I think, you know, in manufacturing too, when manning products, that those products are handled properly. You know, we have and you know, we know that those products that we're consuming like a food are made like a food and intended for people to consume. And you know, product safety is pretty much everyone's responsibility. You know, quality control, product safety is everyone's responsibility. So when you go in a dispensary to, you know, access your medicine, you know, the dispensary staff should be trained. They should know about cannabis as a medicine. They should know. They should be properly trained to fulfill their duties. Those operations should be safe, clean, and secure. They should track. Be able to track where a product came from and be able to contact people who have used a product in the event of a recall. Is that more what you're looking for?
Yeah, no,
Steph?
thank you, Jehan. That's really helpful. I mean, I think that you know, something that I often hear from people when they hear about ASA's work on product safety is, you know, why is this a patient's issue? You know, why isn't product safety and best practices really something, you know, left up to the industry? And you know, what we've found is that as patient advocates, for the longest time, we were the only ones talking about best practices and these standards, and that we also know from talking to medical professionals that one of the reasons they're worried about recommending cannabis to their patients is that they're not sure about the quality control. And so it's really been it's been a lot of work, but it's been really exciting working with agencies like the American Herbal Products Association, organizations like the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia, to produce this information and provide it for regulators, so that regulators aren't just looking at creating laws that don't include diversion, or they're worried about other public health safety, but often they've forgotten about the actual patient safety as well. So we're definitely excited to see states adopting these laws across the country, and I think that what we'll start to see out of this is communities and governments feeling more comfortable about their programs and more confident that the medicine that they are governing is safe and is actually going to be a helpful part of a patient's health regimen, rather than something unpredictable or maybe not as consistent. So thank you, Jehan, for that. So I'm actually, Jehan, I'm going to come back to you in just a minute, but I wanted to talk to some of our guests about their patient advocacy. I'm getting questions about some useful tips as being a patient advocate. Kate, you talked about watching this go on for 17 years before you actually had a state law, and I wonder if you can tell our viewers maybe some tips about being a patient advocate, and really some of the things that you've learned in your work in New York.
Well, that's a great question. It's been it's really been a roller coaster ride, as I think most, I am a patient advocate for my daughter, who's 5 years old, intractable epilepsy. My journey with her has been incredibly emotional, as we learned about her diagnosis and then these horrific seizures that don't stop. So to then have to take that sadness and emotion and go and talk to your legislature, it was very, it was definitely a life-changing experience. The tips that I have for people who are new to this or they don't know what to say is, number one, you really have to be persistent. This is an issue that not a lot of people want to talk about. Senators, assemblymen, governors, they have a million things on their plates, and they are not always going to give you the time of day. It's important that you're able to separate that emotion from fact. We know right now that there are many states running successful programs, that there are many patients that are successfully being treated with this product. You don't want to go in, what I found in New York, you can't go into these meetings using all of that emotion. So to go in prepared, obviously you want to tell the truth. The Drug Policy Alliance was fantastic because they would always just urge you to be yourself and tell your story, and that's how you advocate the best. But to go in with facts and talk to these legislatures about the success that other states are seeing and the trials and the studies that have been done is important. So I would say try to separate your emotional from the other when you're going into these meetings. Be persistent with these guys. If they're not calling you back, keep calling, get to know their staff. I've been recognized walking through the streets and the hallways of the Capitol by staff members. Oh, you're that mom, your daughter, how is she? Those are the types of relationships that are going to get you in the door. What else can I say? Be prepared for anything. We were really not prepared. We got down to the last 3 days of session in New York. We did not know what was going to happen with this bill signing and or the bill vote. And it came down to basically we were being offered one thing. It wasn't necessarily the best version of the bill, but it was sort of a take it or leave it situation. So my other piece of advice is that you may not get the best the best bill that you want, but it's an important place to start, and bills and laws can always be expanded upon. So that's already what we started doing in New York. We have a law. It's not perfect. There are a lot of things we have to do. We need to add conditions. We need to figure out a lot of these logistical problems, but we can always move forward. So start somewhere. It may not be exactly what you want, but just getting a law on the books is history making, and you can always expand upon that.
No, thank you, Kate. That's so important. And I think, there's a fine balance that we have to walk as patient advocates to be able to, sometimes accept legislation that we don't want, but also at the same time be very clear why we're disappointed in those compromises. So it's a very interesting role that sometimes legislators ask us to play, that they're saying, okay, we're gonna change this legislation. You're not gonna get everything you want. But we still want you to support it. And so
Yeah.
I think that could be definitely a challenge for patient advocates. But it also, I think that's something that I think is really important, is that when you accept those compromises, that you're clear with the legislators and with the media and public that it's a compromise bill, right? And I think that sometimes legislators feel like you're not being as fully supportive as you can. But I've also seen the opposite happen, where patient advocates have gone along with compromises and didn't really let the legislators know how far off mark that they had gone. And so when the patient advocates came back the next year to improve the bill, the legislators were a little shocked that they thought that maybe the bill that they had passed. So it really does take quite a bit of concentration and really looking at long-term planning. But I think something that's really clear, really important in that is that we're constantly being clear about what it is we ultimately want. And I think, you said something you said that was really amazing, is tell your story, but be able to continue with the facts. And to, it's hard to separate, your emotions when you're working on legislation that is really going to change your life and change the lives of those that you love. I think you guys are doing amazing work, and thank you for sharing that with our viewers.
Mm-hmm.
And Jean, do you want to add in on that? Can you tell some of our viewers some of the experiences you've had as a patient advocate and some of the more successful meetings, and what were the elements of having those successful meetings?
Sure. I've been sitting here thinking, trying to narrow down the things I want to say because I have so much information.
I bet you do.
It started back when I graduated from a school, a vocational school, the first one in Massachusetts for cannabis, Northeastern Institute of Cannabis, and learned about all of this. And so I started going out and talking to people. I'm fortunate because I grew up with Charlie Baker, our governor. We went to high school together. And he's very approachable, and I've run into him in the town we grew up, and I've approached him, and I told him the problems we're having, and asked him to look into some things when he got into office, like with the DPH and everything and their regulations. And come to find out, to make a long story short, he actually did everything I asked him to do. He looked at the regulations on how what the requirements were for these dispensaries to get their licenses, be licensed through the DPH. What I really want to say is the most important thing is that when you speak to legislators or law enforcement or whoever you're speaking to, it's critical to be professional and kind and not let your emotion get to you. I know it's really hard. I spoke to one of the dispensary owners a couple of weeks ago at a meeting, and we both said to each other, it's getting increasingly hard to, remain calm when you're up speaking to these people, because there is so much ignorance out there. And what I try to do when I go out to advocate and speak to people is I'm very focused on putting forward a mainstream face. You know, I tell everybody I'm 57 years old, professional woman. I raised 2 children to adulthood. One is an Eagle Scout. I'm a cancer survivor. I use cannabis every day. As you can see, I'm not a stoner, and that usually gets some laughs. And, you know, I just state the problems that I'm having or that I'm seeing. And I think I've gotten quite a bit of respect from the people that I speak to. They know that I'm, you know, they know how serious I am, and how I think they know what I'm trying to get across.
Yeah, I think that's something that's so important that you mentioned, Gene, is that so many people have a preconceived notion about what a medical cannabis patient or a medical cannabis advocate looks like. And so I think that when, you know, a lot of the experience I had over the years is that when I would show up in people's offices, they thought that they were at the wrong meeting. And I would have to say, no, I am here to talk to you about medical cannabis. And I think that, you know, being able to really see ignorance as an opportunity for education, I think is something that I'm constantly telling myself, that even though it can, like you said, it can be really hard to keep your calm when people are just so far off base about medical cannabis, that really, you know, our best solution is bringing education, right, and making sure that the judgments people are making about this medicine is really coming from the facts and not from preconceived notions or, as you said, ignorance.
One thing I would like to add is the group of people that I travel around with are like the cream of the crop. I mean, one is Dr. Lester Grinspoon, who, you know, is the man who wrote Marijuana Reconsidered in 1970 and Marijuana the Forbidden Medicine. He's Professor Emeritus of Harvard University. He's like the man. And then we've got Nicole Snow, who's the director of Mass Patients Advocacy Alliance. We've got inventors. We've got, you know, scholars. We've got doctors. Just the level of professionalism, and the dispensary owners themselves. I mean, these people are, you know, we have New England Treatment Access. Their security advisor is Ed Davis, who was the former commissioner of the Boston Police Department, who got us through the Boston Marathon bombing, who was brilliant. I mean, these companies are top-notch. We're working with people who are top-notch, and I want to give kudos to Nicole Snow, because she keeps me, lately she's kept me tethered. You know, I've been like, and she's like, you know, from now on, before you send anything out, you know, pass it through me. I'll take a look at it. So, you know, and we're really starting to gel and become a really powerful advocacy group in the state. And I really feel we're making a huge difference. And I think this thing is just going to break open soon.
Well, thank you, Jean. Yeah, and Nicole is amazing. I think, you know, every state has people that are really grounding the work and really pushing that forward. And I also, Beth Collins, who is now the Communications and Outreach Director for Americans for Safe Access, but has also done a lot of amazing work in Virginia, has also joined us and wants to talk a little bit about her experience as a patient advocate. Beth, welcome.
Thanks, Steph. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of piggyback on some of the topics that you're talking about, particularly when you are, I think probably the most important thing that we've learned in Virginia, where we have incredibly, a very difficult legislators to work with, because they're extremely conservative. When they first heard the word marijuana, they just closed off. So it's really, really been, as Kate was saying, it's a slow process. You have to keep in mind, because I'm one of those people that wants things when I want them, and you know, push really hard. But I've had to learn to just kind of like take the little steps, make the little steps. Every single person you educate is important. And I'd like to stress that everyone you meet when you walk into, you know, ours is called the Virginia General Assembly, whatever your capital, whatever the building is that holds those people, make friends with every single person you meet.
Yes.
The secretary is, the administrative assistant is your gatekeeper. So, you know, become friends. We walk through the Virginia General Assembly now, and people know who we are. And that's really, really important that you build on that, and that you present yourself in a way that they relate to, and you find connections. You know, oh, you live here? Oh, well, my aunt lived there, and I used to visit there. And you start this friendship almost, and they are the gatekeepers, and they'll get you the meetings. And then the legislative assistants, they're wonderful. If you can get them on their side, they have the ear of your senators and your representatives, and they're the ones that will tell them what issues are important and what to look at. And if they're closed off, they're also the ones that will help open them up for you. So you can't underestimate any of the relationships that you make, and keep going back. Persistence is everything, as both Jean and Kate have said. You know, just don't give up. Just keep going back and keep going back. And we were told, you know, bringing research was really important to, especially the more conservative folks. You know, they want to see, back it up. Well, we do have research, so find out the kind of research that they want and give it to them. Georgia has a great research link now, with all different kinds of conditions, and then the research behind it. Borrow from other states what they've done. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, and go to the ASA's website because we have lots of materials for you. So, you know, share with each other, with other advocates in other states, what worked for you, what didn't work, you know, and just keep focusing on those personal relationships and personal connections. When you walk into a legislator's office, look around. If you see, you know, a flag on their wall of a college that you know somebody who went to, say, oh, I love that, you know, I mean, make that connection. Any little connection you make, they look at you differently, you know. And everyone's got, you know, someone in their family with cancer, or somebody, you know, who could benefit from this medicine. Find out what that is and use it.
That's a great point, Beth. I think something that's you know, that I definitely found when I started Americans for Safe Access was how many people really felt like government was something very separate from them, that their elected officials somehow between you know, running for office and getting elected stopped being human, and that the people who work for them maybe aren't human. And I think, you know, something that's you know, a huge important thing to remember as you're doing this work is that you're talking to people. And yes, there are political realities. Yes, you know, it can be an uphill battle in some places to pass these laws. But you have to remember that, yes, the politicians that are deciding these laws are people, and the people that work for them as well. And you know, those connections are really what push these laws through. So thank you for that, Beth. And did you want to add something, Kate?
Yeah, just to expand, we certainly don't have quite the same dynamic as Virginia, but between what's going on in the more metropolitan tri-state area, where we have a more democratic, liberal group of lawmakers, and what happens upstate in the Buffalo area, we had a very Republican, very conservative group, the senators, the assembly members up there. And it was absolutely phenomenal what our patient advocates were able to accomplish upstate. They actually, through their networking, through their phone calls, through their persistence, using, oh, I know so-and-so who works for your staff, or I supported so-and-so when you came out to see us. I mean, they had those Republicans on board so quickly. I mean, we were just all, it was mind-boggling. And ultimately, it ended up being one of the oldest senators in New York, Republican, Hudson Valley, who made the deciding vote on the health committee. And this is a person that you would never expect would be a champion for you, but because this man had something like 20 grandchildren, and he had met patient after patient, he had met a wonderful woman who served in the Navy who now has epilepsy, amongst some other issues. They were able to trade war stories. They were able to meet my daughter Morgan, plus some other young children. He saw these faces. We knew his staff. You know, again, as Beth mentioned, you're on a name basis with their staff. I mean, just so important to form these relationships. And you never know who's going to be the person that will make that connection. They're not going to be able to forget you when they go home at night. They're going to think about it in their heads. So the moment you walk into a meeting, the moment you pick up a phone, you know, you don't know what's going to be the deciding factor. So bring your best game and never be in doubt of what could make the difference.
No, thank you for that, Kate. No, this issue is so interesting because it really, I think when I first started, there was more of a party bias, that this was more of a liberal issue, but over the last decade, it's really a bipartisan issue. And the people, you know, you can't assume just because you're coming into, like you mentioned, an older Republican's office, that they're not going to hear you. And then really, you know, people or the politicians that we've seen become champions are those that make a personal connection to a patient. Because before they meet a patient, this issue is a headline. It's a novel issue to people. There's obviously people that still make a lot of jokes about medical marijuana. And as soon as a elected official can make a personal connection with someone, the jokes stop. The jokes stop amongst their staff. The jokes stop amongst their colleagues, and it really brings this issue home. And so, thanks for bringing that up, Kate. That yes, you never know who is going to be your champion. And we actually have a question here. I'm wondering if we can turn to Jehan. I'm not sure if he's still on here. Jehan, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still here.
Oh, great. So we just got a question about what statistics do we have on military veterans using cannabis under state law, and how many veterans use cannabis as a medicine for what conditions? So I wonder if you could address that question for our viewers.
Sure. Well, in the last couple years, researchers have caught on to increasing you know, reports of veterans using cannabis. There aren't official totals, but based on surveys, they estimate that, for instance, one estimate is that people who are in high trauma jobs or careers like military experience about 40% rate of a diagnosis of PTSD. And in the literature, in the scientific literature, such as with Marcel Bon Miller and his other colleagues, they have noticed that the reports of rates of use for veterans with a PTSD diagnosis is going up. And at first, this was seemed to be only a matter of concern because, well, it's a Schedule I drug. It must not have any medicinal value. But then they were realizing, just published this year, that veterans that are using cannabis seem to be doing better, better processing of emotional stimuli. And most of this, unfortunately, if it was Schedule II, such as if the CARES Act passed, we'd have a clearer distinction, but in a lot of these research studies, they don't distinguish between whether the cannabis was obtained with the supervision of a doctor, where it was obtained from, or how it was ingested. And that's really the drawback to some of the research. But we know that the use by veterans is increasing, but the association is with better emotional processing, less reactivity to things that might aggravate symptoms.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Jehan. I appreciate that. We're coming close to the end of the hour, and I just wanted to come back to the report for just a minute, and I'm going to have our guests say some parting words. But I want everyone who's viewing this to take some time and read this report. It may seem a little intimidating, 130 pages, but really, really 2 pages of that are going to be very important for you, for your state. But we also would love to get your feedback. This process of creating these reports is really just to create a tool for lawmakers. It's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily make sense to compare the grades, because some states scored really high on product safety protocols, but also have scored really low on access or other legal protections. So I think that what we're hoping in Americans for Safe Access is that you see this as an asset in your patient advocacy, that it's something concrete that you can take to your elected officials, that you're talking to about improving these laws. And within this report, we also have model legislation and model regulations. So we're not just saying these are the things that we see wrong with the state laws, but we've also provided policymakers with language that will address these issues, and regulations that will address product safety protocols. So please enjoy the report. I'd love to hear feedback about how it's working in your advocacy. I want to thank the ASA staff for preparing this report. Once you dive in, you'll see how much work it really is, especially to Lana Latimer, who really put the report together for us and has put it together in a beautiful way that you can get through this dense information. With that being said, I just want to turn to our guests and see if there are any final comments about how our viewers can use this report in their advocacy. And Jean, I'll start with you.
Okay, my top advice is to any patient out there within the sound of my voice, please get out there in person. It doesn't do anything to write letters or send emails. You've got to get in front of these people. They've got to see these children. They need to see these people with ALS. That's so much more powerful. That's when they go home and they can't forget you at night. I think that's the most important thing. The second thing is I'm really pushing for research now. I'm a patient at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston, and I was just asking them yesterday, I was talking to the woman that runs the whole research end of it, and I asked her if there's any studies going on with cancer patients and marijuana, and she said no. And I said, well, I really would like to find one, and she's going to work with me and see if we can find a study or studies. And that's it. We just need to find doctors in our area that are working with cancer patients and stuff. But this is great. This show is awesome. You guys down in Washington are doing a fabulous job. I mean, people are doing amazing things around the country, and I'm so honored and so proud to be involved with this wave that's happening, and we're really making a difference, and I applaud everybody who's involved.
Well, thank you, Jeannie, and to you as well. Kate, anything to add for our viewers?
I would say, I have not been able to read the entire 100 so pages of the report yet, but to anyone who is new to this or has been working on this, organize, organize, organize. You are not alone. There are a lot of other people in your state. It may seem like such an isolated effort, especially again, throwing in that word marijuana, as you mentioned, which is just has so much stigma attached to it. But you will find that there are people that want to work on this and want to help. So there are other advocates that are going to help. And there are also a lot of organizations such as ASA, DPA. There are people that want to help you. So reach out. Local organizations as well. I know breast cancer coalitions have a lot of regional support groups. So reach out as much as you can. My second, what we've found here in New York, again, talk to your doctors. Be honest with your doctors. Tell them you want to explore this as a treatment. Don't be scared to bring it up. There is no harm in talking about it. The more that we can get physicians on board, and physicians also wondering if this treatment could be as helpful as they're reading about, that's just immensely important, is getting more doctors on board. So thank you to ASA, and also I'm just so pleased to be able to participate.
Well, thank you, Kate. It means a lot to us that you're here. Sebastian, are you still with us? Any parting thoughts?
Yes, I'm still here. Sorry, I kind of lost you guys for a little bit. I'm in the middle of nowhere, but I'm back. No, just I think what everybody said. You know, it's the way we were able to do this in Georgia is we totally took the politics out of it, and it's not a Republican or a Democrat issue, because if it was, then we had no chance in Georgia. I mean, this is as red as we're gonna get. So we just made it a human right issue. We made it, you know, an issue, and we need this for our kids, for our patients. And, you know, we got, again, really lucky with Allen Peak, but the way it all started is, you know, a little girl called Haley and her mom, Janelle, emailed Allen Peak, sent him a letter, and he replied, "This is great, but why don't you talk to your rep?" And she replied, "You are my rep." And he said, "Oh, okay." And he went to see Haley in the hospital, and that changed everything. That absolutely changed everything. And he left the hospital room, and he said, "All I can think about this entire time is that this could be my granddaughter." And from that day, he never looked back. And it's been absolutely amazing for us. And he still brings up that story. And when the people are against it, he always tell them, if I was your granddaughter or your grandson, you would be doing exactly what I'm doing. So put a human story with it. Bring your kids, bring the patient to the Capitol, to the meeting, to the hearing. That's very important, because they need to realize this is not just a piece of paper, a bill. That's, you know, it's actually affecting people's life. And when we are able to do that with your help, with this report showing that, you know, Georgia still has an F, so we have to get better next year. But when we're able to do that, when we're able to put a human story, a face on it, then it's going to change everything. So that would be my advice. You know, just share your story, bring your kid, share your struggle, and just ask for help, and they will help you if you ask for it. So.
Well, thank you, Sebastian. You're definitely inspiration to everyone around the country. So thank you, and thank you for the allies, the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Beth, any parting thoughts?
I'll try to speak quickly before my dog's been barking at me. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, if you're having trouble organizing folks, you know, call us at ASA, and we'll try to help you find others in your state that are, you know, want to do that, want to advocate. Go to the ASA Unity Conference and Network. You know, go to every meeting you can and try talking to people, and pretty soon you'll find you have this cadre, and it doesn't take too many. You can have like 5 people, and if you're there, and, you know, plan during your state session to use your vacation time and be there every day, walking the halls, wait for them to get off the elevators, find out their schedule, and just like, I mean, we got somebody today on our side just on the elevator. I, you know, jumped in and said, "Hey, Senator, you know, we're here for this bill," and, you know, talked to him between 3 floors. We got him, you know. So it's that kind of thing. You have to just keep pushing, and don't be afraid. They're just people. They're just people. We were so nervous for our first meeting. Now we go in and we're, you know, it's just, we realize they're just other human beings. They're not anything better than you, smarter than you, nothing. They're just people, and connect with them on that level, and you'll be fine, and you'll make change.
Thank you for that, Beth. We have a couple questions I just wanted to address before we jump off, and one was actually asking, you know, as legalization is coming to your states, how can patient advocates work to protect their laws? And I think, you know, the best answer is making sure that the medical cannabis law in your state is implemented. There was a huge difference between what the implementation for medical cannabis looked like, for the legal market, what that looked like in Colorado versus Washington State. And one of the major differences was that Colorado had a very robustly implemented program for medical cannabis, and Washington State actually did not have any statewide regulations. And so as the state began to implement the recreational bill, they found that you know, the issues were getting mixed. So I would say for those who are looking at medical cannabis or at recreational use laws coming into your states, I think, you know, one, make sure that you're interacting with those campaigns and letting them know issues as they arise, but also make sure that you are letting elected officials and policymakers know that medical cannabis is a separate and different issue and deserves its own set of regulations that meet the needs of patients. So I want to thank our guests tonight. Thank you so much. This was really inspirational for me as well, and hopefully for our viewers. And I wanted to remind everyone to download the report. We can't wait to see your responses to the report. And also, as you're using this for your advocacy in your state, let us know how it's going. Let us know how whether this tool is working or not. So thank you all so much, and have a great night.